If you feel like you weren't blessed with a creative eye and you feel like you struggle with taking nice pictures, portraits, this video is for you. See, when I started photography, I really struggled with being creative. It took me a really long time to develop an eye for what a nice photo is and taking nice compositions. So in this video, I'm going to take you inside of my brain and I'm going to show you how I go about taking nice portraits no matter where I am. I want to thank Luminar Neo for sponsoring this video. All right, one of my favorite compositional techniques that I like to use is symmetry. And you can find symmetry anywhere if you're looking for it. You can find it in architecture, you can find it even in lights and shadows, in the patterns of shadows being projected onto walls or wherever. Here I have train tracks, and if I shoot under the train tracks, now I have a bit of symmetry, bit of leading lines depending on how I frame my shot. So let me show you how I would use this to create an interesting photo. See, finding a nice photo composition is unfortunately half the battle, because if the lighting doesn't work, it doesn't look flattering on the model, then the nice composition doesn't matter, you know? It's about finding a good balance. And what I like to do, I'd like to take some test shots. So I took test shots of her from both directions to see what looked best. I had her stand in complete shadow to avoid the spotty lighting. All right, so I placed her in where she's mostly in shadow because the sun is directly above us and it's creating these harsh lights on her body. And I think that's probably the best way to approach this. But then I couldn't get the pillars next to her in the shot and it took away from my original idea. So I settled on shooting her from this angle where I got more depth and I was able to frame her with the train tracks on each side. For this first edit, I used one of Luminar's presets. And these are unlike traditional presets that only focus on color. These make multiple adjustments to the image, like, let's say, smoothing the skin and brightening up the face, along with a bunch of other things in order to help speed up your workflow. And you can always make tweaks to these after the fact. I first used Enhance AI, and I like how I brought out the details in the train tracks above her. In the color tab, this is where I like to make adjustments to the oranges and the blues. This is something that I routinely do for my urban portraits. I boosted the luminance of the oranges to make her skin and the train tracks above her brighter. I like to desaturate and darken the blues to make the concrete appear more gray and neutral. Then I added a vignette to really bring the focus of the image to the model. This is something I really love doing when I have them placed in the center of the image. In Face AI, I slimmed her down a little bit, made her eyes pop a little bit more using the eye enhancer sliders. Then I quickly smoothened the skin using Skin AI. And in Body AI, I did slim her down a little bit. Next, I used the clone stamp to get rid of some of her arm dimples. And in Relight AI, this is where it uses a 3D depth map where you're able to manipulate the lighting in the entire image. So what I did was I darkened the background a little bit while making her a little bit brighter, again, to really bring the focus to her. This is the before and after. Yeah, I could shoot a lot of different photos here. So symmetry is one of my favorite ones, but also leading lines is another one of my go-to compositional techniques for shooting portraits. So here I could do a lot of different things. I could actually pose her on this beam right here, on this pillar, and use the pillars to kind of draw the attention to her using leading lines. Or I could even place her in the middle here and use symmetry to frame her up. And I can actually do a lot of different things here. So let's start. So in theory, this is a shot that I would normally take, but the combination of harsh lighting and not having the proper lens to compress all of the pillars into the shot, this is a no-go. I'm deleting this off my SD card ASAP. I can do multiple things here. I could shoot it from this distance with a 50, then I could back up, use a different lens and compress the background and use these pillars as a foreground, again, to add some foreground interest, but also emphasize the symmetry going on. And yeah, so I'm gonna first shoot this very basic symmetrical photo here. Now, I'm gonna do the same thing, but now I'm gonna shoot from here on this side and use these pillars as a foreground. And now it's gonna add to the entire image now. Unfortunately, I gotta switch to an f4 lens. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, good. Now for this image, I decided to start off with the focus preset. I like the colors, and I also like how I sharpened up the bricks beside her. That was something I was gonna do anyways. In the color tab, I'm gonna do what I normally do, and I'm gonna desaturate the blues, the greens a little bit, and then I'm gonna lift the skin tones by raising the oranges and the reds. Now, for my urban portraits, what I normally like to do is keep the color palette really simple. And I usually desaturate the blues from the concrete and the sky, and then the greens from the trees and the plants. Now over in Magic Light, this is pretty cool. You can artificially create a flare or a light source, and then you could even make adjustments to that light source. But I added it to the top left of this image to really emphasize the fact that it's a backlit image. Then I went over to Face AI, and there I enhanced her eyes a little bit. I don't go crazy with this. It's very easy to go overboard when editing the eyes. I also brought out some of the color in her lips. And then in Skin AI, I smoothened her skin a little bit. Now, when shooting tighter portraits, what I like to do, I like to mask out the lines around the nose and the mouth, just to make sure that blur effect isn't affecting those lines, or else it just doesn't look good. It looks kind of cheap, you know what I'm saying? So you wanna keep that away from those lines on the face. Right. In Body AI, I slimmed her down a little bit, but always be mindful of the lines around the model, or else they'll start to bend. So I used it very minimally here. And then in Relight AI, I actually made the background brighter in this one to make it a little bit more airy. I usually darken my backgrounds a little bit more, but it wouldn't make sense here since it's clearly backlit. And for the final touch, I added a subtle vignette to bring more of the focus on her. This is the before and after. All right, so we've been walking around for a while now. I've been genuinely struggling to find a good composition in this really nasty, harsh lighting, because I'm not using any flash or anything. So, but one thing that I always do rely on is, you know, if you can't find a nice picture somewhere, just focus on getting good light on the model and getting a really tight shot. So the background essentially doesn't really matter as much. You want to make sure that she's got nice, even lighting. And usually you can find that in the shadows. But the problem with that is when you shoot in the shadows, you don't want to shoot with a really bright background, because then it's going to be really nasty and blown out. So I found the spot here where she's getting a natural reflector off this wall here. The sunlight's bouncing off the wall. The photons are illuminating her very nicely and evenly. And I'm going to shoot toward the shade. So the image is going to be pretty balanced. It's not going to be blown out in the background. And I'm going to shoot really nice and tight. Fill the frame, maybe head to waist. And yeah, it's going to be a nice clean portrait. One other thing that I look for a background or location, I look for texture. Different kinds of texture look good, especially it depends on how you edit it as well. But this wall has a lot of texture on it, and if I have her leaning on this wall, this could look nice as a background. So we're gonna try it out. But I'm gonna go to F4 just so that I can get more of that texture on the wall instead of just making it blurry. Good. These are great. One thing I've noticed, Carmen, if you take a step like an inch forward, the sun's gonna be hitting the top of your head, and I kind of like that right there. Yeah. So she's gonna be backlit now. All right, so now we introduced a backlight on her. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Looking off down the alleyway, or maybe at parking lot, right there. Good. Good, there's a car coming. Before editing this image, I don't like the composition of it. So instead of cropping in slightly from the left to center her off, I use Luminar's generative fill just to give me a little bit more leeway on the right side. So I generate a little bit more texture on the right. I ended up using the flawless preset again. It just looks clean and crisp with not too many dramatic changes to the image. Then I used Enhance AI, where it really brought out some of the texture in the wall. And that was kind of the whole point of this image. Then in the HSL tab, what I did was darken the yellows and the blues a little bit. I'm also gonna add a very subtle vignette to the photo. And then in Face AI, I'm gonna add a little bit more light to her face and then slim her down a little bit more, slightly enhance her eyes and her lips. And then in Develop, I increase the white values and then decrease the blacks a little bit just to increase the overall contrast of the image. I think it came out beautiful. This is the before and after. So these are some of the ways and techniques that I use when I approach portrait photography on location. It was truly the worst time of day to shoot out there. The sun was right above us. I mean, it was tough, but I still think I made it happen. If there is something that I want you to walk away with from this video, is to don't be afraid to experiment and take bad photos. I mean, that's the only way you learn what works and what doesn't. And I do it all the time. It's part of learning, and that is how I have gotten to the point where I am now. I also want to thank Luminar Neo for sponsoring this video. They make the editing process really effortless, and I would say my favorite part about editing my photos in Luminar is how creative you can get with your photos. You can do complex things without having to be a Photoshop wizard, you know? So if you want to check them out for yourself, I'm gonna leave a link in the description. Check you out later.